Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki Master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Welcome back to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. Today we radiate interconnectedness with Elise Brenner and Nancy Spatz, who have written the book Reiki, a self-practice to live in peace with self and others. And as a Reiki master myself, I'm just thrilled with this because I think that Reiki is such a wonderful practice we can all do. So welcome, Elise and Nancy. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I've really been looking forward to this. So, well, let's just dive in. So your book is all about self-practice. Why did you want to focus on self-practice?
That's mine, right?
Whoever wants to take it.
We divvy these up.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah, we did. Well, you look at many healing practices that we see around, and many of them are practitioner directed.
Right.
And one of the beautiful things about Reiki practice is that it's both practitioner directed and self-directed. And the part that's so famous in the West is practitioner directed because it's a very kind of Western concept to direct and manage and accomplish something. But the original teachings in Japan from Sensei Usui really focused on the self, the precepts, the meditations like Joshin Kokyu Ho. And by cultivating the self and elevating your own experience, that, may I use your word, Christy, radiates. And so you can be kind of being the message of Reiki when you're in line at the bank.
Yes.
When you're fearful of COVID, when you are, so it's not just the outwardly directed doing, right? Mm-hmm. And the self-directed part, the self-practice is egalitarian. Mm-hmm. It's health and wellness equity. It's for everybody, not just those that can afford a practitioner. Mm-hmm. So I think that is it what I'd like to say. And
yeah, absolutely. And also I think what Elise just said at the very end about that, so it's egalitarian, so everyone can do it and feel well, and it reaches all different types of populations and people, and so everyone has an opportunity to learn self-care.
Absolutely. You know what? I would like to back up just a little bit in case we need to do this. I'd like to just go over what Reiki is in case there's anybody who maybe has heard of it, but doesn't really know what the practice is about.
Reiki is a healing and meditation practice to care for self and others, to promote resilience and mindfulness, well-being, and a sense of participation consciousness with all beings, a sense that there's really no separation.
Right.
The word Reiki literally means sacred energy. So in Usui's time, it would have been translated as sacred energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. From the words Rei and Qi, of course, Qi being this life force energy that in Chinese is known as Qi. So, right. And there's just this I don't know about Massachusetts, but man, in Kansas City, in the Midwest, there's this proliferation of people who are trained and certified in Reiki. And even just with Reiki 1, which some people choose to stop there, or Reiki 2 without going on to the master, but that's okay, because Reiki 1, you can practice Reiki with yourself and share it with yourself. Right.
Absolutely. Reiki 1 is a complete healing and meditation system. You're going to learn the precepts, Joshin Kokyu Ho, the essential Reiki, Japanese Reiki meditations.
Now, in your book, you make an analogy that the Reiki practice, or a Reiki practice, is like a palm tree. Can you explain to listeners how that is? How is Reiki like a palm tree?
Sure. So in Reiki practice, we use hara breathing. And hara breathing is a practice where you steady the mind and the body by taking a refreshing breath in and a longer breath out. And when you do that, you bring about the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calming part of the nervous system. So relax, decrease inflammation. And this gets back to the analogy, because when you look at a palm tree in a storm and you see the wind blowing and you see the top of the palm tree and all the fronds blowing and everything is sort of chaotic and messy. But when you look down at the base of the tree, it's steady and rooted. And so with Reiki practice, like the hara breathing that I just described, you can be like a palm tree in a storm, rooted and grounded.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, palm trees are meant to be flexible so that they can stand up to that level of wind. Now, in full disclosure, when we started this interview, we actually started like 25 minutes late, because I was subbing. I'm a substitute teacher, as well as all the other things I do. It was second graders all day, and I knew I would be getting out of there late, and came skidding in, and Elise said, "You know what? You know what we should do? Let's practice some breathing." I said, heck yeah, let's practice some breathing. And I tell you, that really just helped center and calm my body. So yeah, this Hana breathing really does tame the vagus nerve, allows the body to shift its nervous system over to rest and digest. Yeah, it's all good. So a palm tree, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense. Now, but you also compare a Reiki practice to a snow globe. I think I understand why the snow globe, but can you? Oh, look at you. You've got a snow globe.
So Christy and Nancy knows this. When I do Reiki outreach in places to teach these skills that are in the book, I bring it with me. And I say, hey, when I shake this up, I really can't see the scene very clearly. Mm-hmm. But when the snow particles settle and settle and settle down and all the way down to the bottom, I can see the scene clearly. So now the analogy, if we can imagine that our minds are like the globe, and the snow particles are like our thoughts, Reiki practice is really about settling the snow particles of the mind, or a lovely way that I've heard it is untangling the knots, Knots, untangling the knots of the mind. And this relates to the Japanese Reiki practice of Joshin Kokyu Ho. In Joshin Kokyu Ho, you unify or harmonize the mind and the body through the breath. So on the in-breath that goes down through the body, you settle the thoughts down and down into the hara space, Hara.
And the hara space is the deep belly.
The lower belly, just like 3 finger widths below the navel. It's a conceptual space. And then both mind and body and breath are unified. And then on that out breath, that refreshed, settled self. So untangling the knots of the mind and then sharing that with others.
Yeah. And it really does feel like that. I mean, when we do practice this deep breathing, you just generally feel the whole body just settle like the glitter in a snow globe. Yeah, it's lovely. And this is something you can do anywhere. In the waiting room, in an elevator, before a meeting. And nobody has to know we're doing it. And it's a practice that we don't even have to have Reiki certification or training. We can all do this. And I think it's a wonderful technique. Now, in the same vein, you also compare Reiki precepts to a compass. Now, how does that work? I love analogies. I have to say I'm a very visual person, and I love your analogies.
So, as a compass gives direction, the Reiki precepts can give you a direction. And I'm not sure I can go over what the Reiki precepts are, if that would be helpful. The Reiki precepts are, they're 5, and it's for today. Do not live in anger. Do not live in worry. Be grateful. Be true to your way in being, mean be honest with yourself so you can be honest with others. And the 5th one is be compassionate to yourself and then compassionate to others. So we follow these principles that give us direction, like the compass gives us direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's okay, right, Nancy, that we miss the mark and our steering is not always right in the direction we want to go. Like multiple times a day, we're going to have our learning lessons where we are aware that anger is arising within us, or we're aware that worry is arising in us, and we don't pause and notice, and we are just not with mindful awareness at that moment. And then we may blurt out unskillful, unkind words. So this is going to happen. And then we learn from that, because our everyday life is our practice. It's not just sitting there on your meditation cushion. It's when you're in the thick of it, often with the people you're closest to, that you fall into your habitual reactive conditionings, and you do not embody, we do not embody the precept. So we are always having to start again. And then we start again. And 20 years later, we're still starting again. And that's what it is to be human, and to have the tendency to, protect ourselves with our anger, worry, and fear. And we protect ourselves because we love ourselves. And it's just that it backfires.
And that's okay. It's putting the human in the human experience.
Yes. And in the book, we actually, have a chapter on the precepts, and we have a way, we give examples as to how to think about them. And, the thing also about the book that we really like is that depending on what you're feeling that day, you can just look at one of the precepts, look at a different whatever you're feeling. Like if you're feeling worry that day, you can go to the section on the book that's just about worry and be able to think about it, and how you could help yourself feel less stressed.
Oh, absolutely. It reminds me very much of The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always would notice this, that
Right.
all the systems, teachings, and practices of wisdom and compassion, like we talk about here, they're all the same.
Yeah.
People say it's different paths up the mountain, and some people like this path and some like that path. And I always say, stick to that path and go deep, go all the way. Don't get sidetracked too much, especially in a commodified wellness culture that we have here today in the U.S.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, in your book, you have some stories, some examples of people who've overcome some challenges. And I would love for our audience to hear about some of that and how Reiki and having a Reiki practice for themselves can help.
Yeah. So I'll do one and then Nancy will do one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always like this common experience, pretty much, I would think, and it's in everyday life, a very intense moment, like in a medical or a hospital waiting room where you may be waiting for test results.
You're right.
And here's a situation where, let's say, everyone is in a room, in a waiting room, waiting for results. They're all in a waiting room, waiting for results. And people look like they're leafing through a magazine. They're on their phone. They look like, wow, everyone here is they're managing this okay. They all look like they're fine. Why am I like spiraling out with my thoughts? Well, we all are spiraling out in our thoughts. Mm-hmm. This might be a time to gather yourself in, like all of your falling apartness, kind of pull and gather those pieces together into wholeness, which is healing, by practicing the Hara breathing, right? That lengthened out breath. And sure, place the hands on yourself. No one cares. I do it all the time. And it's not going to be perfect, but it's an in the moment, just down regulating the physical and emotional hyper arousal that's being embodied. Of course, it's being embodied. It's natural. But yet there's a skill to work with our own selves. And when we do that, we're just healing a bit there so that we're not causing like damage to all the systems of our body by those hormones and neurotransmitters just shooting through us, you know? And one little moment like that, or just a few little moments like that in a waiting room, even if it's an hour, that's a very small amount of time, the practice becomes cumulative. So like over time, you actually get more skillful at this, and you can move into that space of down regulation, maybe a little bit quicker, and then maybe fall apart a little bit less and kind of realize what you may need.
Right.
So that's one anecdote.
Right. And what I love about Reiki is it's really hard to screw it up.
That's a good point, eh, Nancy? Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's literally all good.
Did you know that Radiate Wellness is more than just a podcast? That's right. We're also a comprehensive, holistic wellness practice. Find out about our services, practitioners, and upcoming events at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. While you're there, visit our podcast page to read more about our great guests and even donate to the podcast. If you like our podcast, you can help in other ways as well, like Subscribe or follow us wherever you're listening right now. Tell a friend, a family member, or a coworker about the great content you find here. And if you wouldn't mind, please give us a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, or a positive review. Sounds like a small thing, but it really helps. You might like to know about our Facebook communities while we're at it. We have a free community, the Radiate Wellness community, on Facebook for news and great free content. Our subscribers group is Radiate U, as in the letter U, but also, well, you. There you'll find curated replays of past classes, guest interviews, and more. And now, back to our podcast and back to our guest.
I like the fact that we use anecdote in our book because it really helps with real life situations. And like we talked about, life isn't always just so smooth. It has ups and downs. And when we give these anecdotes, we're hoping that people can, think about similar situations that they could be in or help them. So one of our chapters in the book is called the intentional response or the mindful pause. And there's so many anecdotes I like, but let's see. One of the anecdotes we use is about feeling helpless, where a situation where there's a patient that has a very difficult illness, and a relative or friend, whoever, goes to visit, and they feel completely helpless because they think they're not doing anything. And, we are in those situations a lot where we feel like we can't do anything. So how, that's, it's very tough.
You feel helpless and hopeless.
Right. And so in the chapter, we talk about the intentional pause and how to do that. And when you do take an intentional pause, you can then realize that you are really doing something, even if you think you're not. And the example with the patient that someone was visiting was that the patient was actually just appreciative that the person was just there and they didn't have to do anything and except be there because of the interconnection. And we both find that's very useful in day-to-day situations, how to learn how to pause. And usually we can tie this back to the Hara breath, that if you're in a moment where you're very stressed out and you don't know what to do, when you take that Hara breath and you downregulate or, start the parasympathetic nervous system going and calm the body, and you by nature will then pause. And so you can add that into your practice, and we go over that with some of these anecdotes.
Yeah, sometimes we just overthink things. And sometimes we want to be all about action when being in inaction is exactly what's needed.
Oh, you said it. In this example, I think the person was all about, well, I got to do something to fix things. And that was the lesson for that person, was just that. The mind makes things so complicated. But what was needed was really, I say this in a loving way, not a disparaging way, kind of actually an honoring way, a more childlike simplicity of just be there, as Nancy said. Yes. And that was really a really wise comment, Christy. Thank you. I just wanted to underline that.
Underline me whenever you like me. Because I do think we make things too complicated. We want to do rather than just know that perhaps our strength could be in the pause. Our strength could be in the silence and the stillness. A huge proponent of that. Speaking of silence and stillness, the title of your book includes Live in Peace with Self and Others. These days, that seems impossible. What would you say to that?
So I'd like to tie this into also chapter 10 on Reiki practice and social justice. So I'm going to do a double.
Yes.
And I think that the pause example that you gave, Nancy, is actually a great segue, because when we pause, we are going underneath layers of conditionings. We are going underneath layers of reactive habits and discovering what's already there. And what's already there is humans are in connection. Humans are in community. Humans are social beings. And Sensei Usui, who founded the system, who developed the system of Reiki in the early 1900s in Japan, based on Buddhist and Shinto and Taoist teachings, he had a 3-year meditation retreat, followed by a 3-week meditation retreat where he really was looking to die so that he could be hurry up and be reincarnated to achieve enlightenment on Shinritsume. But he didn't die. He achieved experienced a kind of enlightenment. And when he came down that mountain, he said, "The universe is in me, and I am in the universe." Mm-hmm. Which means there's no difference between I and you. There's no othering. It's one participation consciousness. And so when we embody the precepts, thank you, Nancy, for going over them, we experience this, what's called like a non-dual consciousness. We understand it's cognitive, yes, but also we directly experience this field that we share. In which case, if I'm living in peace with myself, then I'm living in peace with others, because that's what's already there. Now that brings up social justice, because even though I'm a white lady and I don't have the experience of BIPOC, of people, Black, Indigenous, or other people of color, I don't have that experience, that direct experience, because of a sense of interbeing. I can't help but put myself out into that field, at the least as an ally, possibly even better as what's called now an accomplice. If somebody wearing Black skin puts themselves at risk every day in this country just by being alive, then the least I can do is put myself at risk by saying words in as much support as I can and making myself present in what protest rallies, if that's one's thing, So to me, there is no difference between a Reiki practice and repairing the world. There is no difference, nor should there be a difference, and it's our responsibility.
Love that. I feel so strongly about social justice, and it really does begin with each individual. There's that song, Let There Be Peace on Earth and Let It Begin with Me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because when we do have peace within, then we experience peace without as well. Right.
Yeah, we minimize that whatever that we're seeing now, the hatefulness that has become unleashed in this country, the hatefulness unleashed.
It really has.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's very disturbing.
It is. I kind of think of it sometimes as the pendulum swinging so far that it needs to settle like the snow globe. Right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So self-practice with Reiki can really help facilitate that peace within, that peace without. So if I wanted to start a self-Reiki practice, how do I start? How do I begin? What do I need to do to establish that?
Well, actually, this is one of my favorite chapters in the book, but we actually go over how to do that. Because personally, having, learned about Reiki, and there's so many different options that sometimes you read all about it and then you're like, okay, now what? So we actually break it down to, for if you want to do a practice every day, we give certain guidelines like, set a timer for 15 minutes, use the different practices, whichever practice you like that we offer in the book, and make sure that you take that time for yourself, because that's compassionate to yourself and to others. And then we also go over how to use the tools in the moment, like we talked about earlier. So we give different options, but we really do break it down so people will kind of have a direction, have a compass, sort of be able to just feel better about themselves, calm their mind, and, strengthen their body, and then be able to feel good about yourself, and like we just said, and others.
And others. So one of the techniques, one of the tools that you talked about was this Hana breath, this deep belly breath, and the slow exhale. It's the slow exhale, I feel, is the magic sauce that really calms the vagus nerve and shifts our nervous system over. Are there any other practices that you talk about in the book that you'd like to share now?
I would like to suggest that I kind of talked about Joshin Kokyu Ho with the unifying the breath. We talked about the precepts. Nancy, how do you feel about either hands-on healing or 3 diamonds of ki?
Yeah, I was thinking of hands-on healing because I think it's something that people can, use right away.
Yeah, and it makes it's a very embodied practice, and there's a lot of science on that. And I know, Christy, you seem to be really familiar with the science, and so it's related to what Herbert Benson calls the relaxation response. So, Reiki practice can be actually classified as an RR, a relaxation response practice or therapy or whatever word you like to use. And because you mentioned the vagus nerve, let's start with that. So let's take a person who is, has a lot of physical and emotional reactivity and a hyper arousal. That child, that individual may be given one of these weighted blankets. Right. A weighted blanket, and they put it on their torso. They lie it on top of them. And the reason behind that is a physiological response related to the pressure stimulates the vagus nerve. You brought it up. And that is what's going to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, that branch of the nervous system. So when we do hands-on healing with self, or others, and we're placing the hands with that gentle pressure on the body, we are stimulating the vagus nerve. But not only that, there are certain nerves. See, tactile nerves, they're everywhere on the body. Well, not everywhere. They're only where the hairy skin is. So it's not on the palms, the lips, or the soles of the feet. And when they are telling the body to go into a kind of an equilibrium. So the touch on the body is working with these receptors in the skin, these nerve endings in the skin. CT afferents, as they're called. So we have the relaxation response, we have the vagus nerve, we have the CT afferents, we have the parasympathetic nervous system. With hands-on healing, we also know that our brain waves shift. And with other practices too, don't get me wrong, shift from, well, I hope we are all in beta brain waves now, fully engaged, you and your listeners and us. In Reiki practice, especially hands-on healing with all the goodness it's doing physiologically, shifts the brain waves to alpha brain waves, and even you will definitely theta brain waves. And this is a deep meditative state where really overall mind, body, emotional, and spiritual healing can happen. So I think that if we want Reiki practice to be in the mainstream, we should do, what mindfulness, because I'm also a mindfulness teacher, what mindfulness has done to move into the mainstream, which is evidence-based practice. Talk the language that is understood in mainstream science and medical world.
We're in the corporate world as well. Many large companies, and in fact, before COVID, I was the meditation instructor and Reiki Master at Hallmark Cards International.
Fun!
It really was. And TVH North American headquarters as well. So even the corporate, and Google has Search Inside Yourself, which is a program. It was very well known. Apple has similar programs. Garmin, Ford, all encourage mindfulness in their employees. So this is really becoming more mainstream. And I do feel like Reiki is gaining ground, much like chiropractic used to be completely alternative, but now it's covered by most health insurance programs, right? Right. And seeing is more. And you two are more mainstream in your backgrounds. So Nancy, you're an MD, and Elise, you are an associate professor in the Department of Public Health at Simmons University in Boston. So you both, how did you even come to Reiki from those backgrounds?
So going through my residency and medical school, and I always wanted to, I was always thinking about preventative medicine or something that could be an adjunct to medicine or something that people could, before getting ill or while they're ill or after they're ill, have some tools that they could use. And I also studied psychology and was interested in, doing meditation tapes back. I won't say how many years back, but 10 years ago.
With tapes.
What happened was I stumbled upon Reiki because a friend of mine was going through some medical issues, and she said, I'm going to see a Reiki practitioner. And I was like, oh, this was years ago. But so then I started really I learned about it, and I went through many different trainings. And then I met Elise, and I was like, yes, this is exactly the kind of Reiki that I'm interested in. And so from there, it just has been just I'm very grateful for Reiki because I feel that it really, helps people heal. And when we say heal, we mean feel whole. So while it may not be curative for certain things, you can still feel whole and healed. And so that's what we're trying to, help people by this book, which is, anyone can use it and learn the tools and learn to feel whole or healed despite the many ups and downs of life.
Oh, absolutely. And when we are in stress, that creates inflammation within the body. It adds to most, if not all, illness and disease. But when we can calm that stress response, then it might not be curative, but it allows the body to heal, which it was meant to do. And so, Elise, how did you come to Reiki?
Yeah, let me I'm underlining you for a minute, Christy.
And what you underline me all day long, Elise.
Spotlight on Christy, where the way I like to envision this, and it's been helping people when I say we're setting up an inner terrain, like land, soil, terrain in our body and mind.
Right.
So that when the awful things happen, the unbeautiful things of life, the hurting, suffering, and pain and uncertainty of life, we have set up this terrain within ourselves for, now to underline spotlight on Nancy, for wholeness, because the opposite of wholeness is being shattered, being broken, falling apart. I'm falling into pieces. I feel like after that experience, a little piece of me is missing. In shamanism, it's soul loss, right? Something is gone. So intactness is, wholeness is putting it all back together. We're really landing here fully intact, gathering all the pieces that we left around, right? Like even today when you came in, Christy, you had that, delay, and probably pieces of you were on your commute and with the people you were with, and to gather it all in. So, and as a practiced practitioner, you yourself, you can do it a lot quicker after many years of practice too. You can find that place within yourself a little bit quicker. Anyway, so spotlight now. I will. You asked like how I came to Reiki practice. Well, yeah. I'm the last person probably on the face of the earth that anyone would expect to be involved in Reiki practice, which is why the traditional Japanese teachings, which are so earth-bound and down to earth, appeal to me. And so much very public healthy, and or as Nancy would say, population-wide prevention. You talked about prevention, and I'm also, my PhD is in anthropology, and I've been informed, of course, by a lot of cross-cultural healing practices that see, no distinction between you and me, between you, me, and the waterfall, where there's this consciousness, this non-dual consciousness, and that all healing is tied up with one's spirit self, one's soul self, the sacred element of self. So it wasn't a big stretch, really. I just was concerned about appropriation of other cultures' practices, but an experience led me to kind of be given permission to honor and utilize and honor other people's systems, like something from Japan or something from here or there. So with that permission and another kind of opening that happened in my life, was it 22 years ago? About 22 years ago, and then following that, just a series of coincidences with Reiki, right? Coincidences, Reiki, all of a sudden, never even heard of it. Right. And then I said yes, like Nancy talked about saying yes to that, and brought me here. And so it's been a long time that I've been practicing. Well, it would have been nice if I had started at 18 or 16. I would have staved off years of suffering, but nonetheless, I guess that had to happen.
There are no coincidences. I would like to.
Exactly, right? I know, right? Coincidence. Oh, this is a podcast. It's in quotation marks and with my
air quotes.
Air quotes. Thank you. You're so with it, Christy.
And Elise, I was just thinking as you were speaking that we were following the fourth precept. We were being true to our way of being, because we had a really sort of a purpose to help heal. So we kind of, when we met and realized we had the same purpose, that's what then generated the book.
And let's also tell them, Nancy, that one of our common purposes turned out to be our fathers who had, died, fairly much longer ago, were both people of unconditional love.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
But that's one of the things that we discovered together. And the book is definitely birthed through them, and we dedicate the book to them. Mm-hmm. And that was just like air quotes, strange coincidence.
Right. So while they were definitely not practitioners, they followed all the Reiki precepts, and fortunately both Elise and I were, had that experience with them. So we were definitely similar feelings, heartfelt feelings.
Because they were part of us.
Yeah, getting the word out. Right. And so, yeah.
Love that. Love that. Yeah. Yes. So Yeah, I'd like to kind of circle around now. Before we even started recording, we were talking about the current climate of COVID. We were talking about the climates of fear, of worry, of grief, even. And I would add even grief as to the way we were living beforehand. And we don't, we're having to make so many changes. And even kids in school and what they're going through and how they're adjusting. How can a Reiki practice, or are there any Reiki practices that you would like to recommend that will empower us to, lose the fear, lose the concern, and just live? Yes.
Before we go into a practice, I'll preface, because maybe Nancy wants to take it. We don't lose fear. We don't want to shoo it away, and we don't no, we don't want to deny it. It's actually not about, we agree, Nancy and I agree, that it's not about losing the fear. It's about how we will choose to relate to the fear.
Thank you.
We will choose to relate to the uncertainty. And in order to do that, we have to be very familiar with ourselves. So it's just a subtle language thing. But Nancy, we'll take it from there, maybe.
So, absolutely. But also to add, I think that you're absolutely right, Christy, that there's been a lot of time that but just development for kids that's just been so hard. And so there are certain exercises or tools that kids can do to decrease their anxiety. So while the fear will still be present because it's just a fearful time in the world, if we can help the children, teachers, decrease their anxiety by the hara breathing, by the hands-on healing, that would be very helpful, I think, to help people get through day to day. And actually in our book, we have a chapter, a section on children and different ways to help them. And so it's sort of like a simplified version of the hands-on healing, or, something that they can do in the moment. So, again, it's getting back to the practices and the skills. And, if we can, even for a moment, decrease a child's anxiety, then I think it's very important.
Right.
And to underline, so Nancy mentioned that we do have a chapter where we talk about different populations and how to make Reiki practice more close for them. And so, yes, children, adolescents, and in that piece of the chapter, the children and adolescents pieces, one of the things we would love to see is this done in a group setting. Yeah. So this would mean school counselors, school teachers. We would love to train school counselors and school teachers, and then they spread this. And for really little kids, there's some really fun ways to learn hara breathing. We'll let people read the book. We'll let people read the book on that. We talk about, because I've done outreach in places, settings where elderly people are living.
Yes.
So elders, yes, certainly alone in their own time, but to bring this into a communal collective space is also super important. People who are suffering from chronic health conditions, whether it might be migraine, chronic pain, brain aneurysm, they don't know what to do. Should I go for the surgery? Should I wait? What will, there's so much. I've done, outreach with survivors of intimate partner violence. I mean, there's no end to suffering. And the simpler of the practices, like Nancy was saying with the children, hara breathing with hands-on healing, the more likely people are to persist. I'm sorry.
Yeah. For kids, sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
No, just like you mentioned, Christy, how the lengthened out breath seems to help calm things down. Mm. So like one of the things we mention is like if you're teaching a child how to breathe and you to have the hara breath so you can have the longer out breath, pretend that they're blowing out candles on a birthday cake. Mm-hmm. Like things that can make it for children fun so it doesn't feel like, another thing that I have to do, but just a way to calm the body by bringing about the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah. So, I love that. Yeah. It's empowering, just as you had talked about the anecdote of someone who was like worried and stressed about their friend and just feel empowered to do something that, children, administrators, anyone in the community can feel empowered to do that. So we've only just got a few minutes left in this session. And where can we find your book, Reiki, a self-practice to live in peace with self and others?
I can start with that. You can pre-order it right now on Amazon.com. You can order it on indiebound.com, Barnes and Nobles. And we are hoping that it will be in your local bookseller shortly. The official publication date is, drumroll please, January 28th.
Yes. Now, this episode will likely be out after that. So it will be,
okay.
It will be out and you can find it wherever fine books are sold, as they say. Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble, but I really like indie books because it supports independent booksellers. To me, that's very important. So Elise and Nancy, thank you so much for joining me today. This has really been wonderful. I appreciate you both.
We're honored to be in this space with you and your listeners, and much love and connection to everybody.
Right. And thank you and wellness to everyone.
Yeah, I love that.
Radiate Wellness is an international community of holistic and alternative healers dedicated to helping you create spiritual, energetic, and physical well-being. To learn more about our practitioners, services, classes, and events, or to schedule an appointment, visit us at radiatewellnesscommunity.com.